Today, Lukashenko asks whether 3 is a crowd. Alternatively, will the war expand, or is this just a Belarusian bluff? Well, let's find out. On August 25th, Ukrainian intelligence reported that Belarusian forces were gathering along their shared border. To situate ourselves, we have Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk oblasts in Russia. Kharkiv city is here, and the front that Russia opened up a few months ago is coming down from the north. There may also be something brewing the other way for Ukraine as of yesterday. Meanwhile, Ukraine's main offensive is going on inside of Kursk, outcome to be determined. From there, we must leapfrog past Bryansk and head to Gomel, the site of the Belarusian buildup, featuring a tasteful touch of Wagner mercenaries. It lies north of Kyiv, with the lovely resort town of Chernobyl sitting in between. Gomel has factored into the war once before. It was where Russian troops staged the Kyiv convoy back in February 2022, the start of the invasion. This was done under the auspices of a wargaming exercise, which just so happens to be the public explanation for Belarus's recent movement. That, in turn, raises 3 key questions. 1. Why would Belarus help Russia? 2. Will Belarus actually do it? And 3. How should Ukraine respond? The why part is as straightforward as it is old. When the Soviet Union fell, the corresponding divorce between Russia and Belarus never really took place. By 1997, the two countries had signed the Union Treaty, which was intended to eventually reintegrate the two countries. And just to appreciate how long ago it was when this agreement was made, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko looked like this. It is the same guy, I swear. Boris Yeltsin was still president of Russia. No one had ever heard of some guy named Vladimir Putin, and the theory of lines on maps was celebrating its 2nd birthday. Indeed, although North Korea, China, and Iran received the most attention as Russia's coalition partners for this war, the strongest historical relationship has always been back in Minsk. Then again, perhaps relationship is not the right word for it. Dependency may be more precise. You see, at least at the start of the invasion, Vladimir Putin was legitimately popular within Russia. It is complicated, but political scientists had some tricky ways to test that, and it was less like this and more like this. Now, that was tainted by the Kremlin's control over the Russian media and the absence of fair competition in a liberal democracy. But conditional on that, Putin did not need to further manipulate vote counts to win office. He was doing just fine with the legitimate numbers. However, the same cannot be said about Lukashenko. For Belarus's 2020 presidential election, Lukashenko's main opposition was Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, who herself was running because her YouTube star husband was arrested and could not. And no, this is not giving me ideas. Back on topic, Lukashenko claimed to have won 81% to 10%, but the European Union refused to acknowledge the outcome. Tikhanovskaya then fled to Poland and Lithuania to form a government in exile, and she continues to meet with Western world leaders. Part of the reason that elections protests in Belarus against Lukashenko did not snowball into something more was the threat of external intervention from Moscow. As if to remind ourselves that we are living in the Second Cold War, Belarusians remember how Prague Springs blew into Russian tanks. And in case they forgot, the Kremlin's later intervention in the 2022 protests in Kazakhstan now serves as a stark reminder. The point is, absent the shadow of Moscow, it is unclear whether Lukashenko has the support to stay in office. Consequently, Lukashenko has strong incentives to keep the Kremlin happy, and when he is not negotiating with Yevgeny Prigozhin to end the thunder run on Moscow, it means moving troops to the border with Ukraine today. You see, with the Kursk offensive underway, both Russia and Ukraine are even more short-staffed than before. Belarus invading Ukraine would make Ukraine's problem worse, without much affecting Russia's situation. After all, Russia would not be supplying the majority of the manpower. So it is not that Belarus wants to do it, so much as it is Lukashenko doing Putin a favor. Okay, so that is the why. But will Belarus do it? Well, the prevailing bets at the moment are against a second invasion. Or is this the third one now? I'm having a hard time keeping score. Regardless, historically speaking, such late additions to a war are rare. Unfortunately, public perceptions of interventions lead us astray here. The US entries into World War I and World War II were prolific because they were both late and pivotal, but they are abnormal. You see, for the most part, you get the most bang for your buck by coordinating war strategy with your partner from the start. Now, Ukraine has no guarantees that Belarus will follow the pattern here. Nevertheless, Lukashenko's incentive to help Russia paradoxically also discourages his entry into the war. Russia does not have troops to spare for ventures outside of Ukraine. We have already seen the consequences of Russia's shortage in Nagorno-Karabakh in September 2023. Back then, Russian peacekeepers were supposed to be protecting Armenians living in a disputed section of Azerbaijan. But Azerbaijan attacked anyway. Then Russia basically sat back and watched, even after 5 of its peacekeepers were killed. The reason was that the Kremlin simply could not afford to take on another task when Ukraine was tying up so many resources already. The implication for Lukashenko here should be concerning. If there is an uprising in Belarus, then Russia might not be there to help. That said, the good news here for Lukashenko is that the initial spark of civil unrest is hard to come by. Even without Russia's help, protesters need to vastly outnumber security forces to begin a revolution. The problem is that protesters worry that they will show up on the street corner alone, which is a great way to find yourself in jail. Consequently, what keeps Lukashenko safe is ordinary citizens having the default belief that there will not be an uprising today. That keeps them at home, which in turn convinces others to remain at home, which reinforces the original decision to stay home. What anti-government elements need to overcome this self-fulfilling prophecy is some type of rallying cry. Now, do you know what would make for a great rallying cry? How about Belarusians being sent to die in Ukraine? And the irony is that Russia's very desire for this to happen is also what would prevent the Kremlin from saving Lukashenko. Moreover, Belarusians know this, and that would further encourage them to storm the streets. Does that mean that a Belarusian incursion into Ukraine is impossible? No, but it does indicate that the odds are low, and predicated on Moscow having more leverage with Minsk than is publicly known, or Lukashenko feeling much more secure than the world believes. And that takes us to how Ukraine should handle the situation. The basic dilemma is that Ukraine's counterplay depends on expectations of what Lukashenko is actually willing to do. If Belarusian forces truly will cross the border at any moment, Ukraine needs to reposition its soldiers to withstand the new invasion. However, this will come at a significant cost. They would likely need to come from Kursk due to its close proximity, which will deny Ukraine further advances in that region. The only other option would be from the east, but that would take more effort, and Kyiv probably does not want to cede ground there at a faster rate than it is already. On the other hand, if this is all a collective bluff from Belarus and Russia, then a skeletal crew would remain fine. Now, Ukraine cannot leave the area barren. Even if you pretend like the Belarusian soldiers do not exist, Wagner forces are still in the area. But there need not be an abundance of blue and yellow soldiers. So, what to do? Well, this actually parallels the same sort of strategic conundrum that Russia faced on the eve of the Kursk offensive. What you definitely should not do in this situation is average what you would need to stop Belarus with what you would need otherwise, weighed by the relative likelihood that each of those things might happen. This gives you too many if you are fighting against just Wagner, and not enough against a committed Belarusian force. Funny enough, you guys seem to catch on to this. My original poll on the topic trapped 32% of respondents with the weighted average. But since the previous video came out when I first explained why the average is a bad idea, the numbers dropped to 28%. So, hooray, improvement. Oh, and just for fun, I checked whether ChatGPT could do this problem correctly. It could not. This is an ugly word salad of strategy that ultimately recommends the weighted average. Wrong. Anyway, for the current problem, given the public skepticism, it appears that Ukraine is sticking with a mild protection force. Referencing the completely made-up numbers from before, Ukraine is doing the option analogous to 1,000 soldiers, not what is analogous to 10,000 soldiers, and definitely not whatever is analogous to the objectively wrong 1,900 soldiers. The small force will protect Kyiv from Wagner, but essentially concedes territory if Belarus is serious about an invasion. It is just the price to pay to keep Kursk going and not lose even more territory in the east. And that allocation decision will not change unless something dramatic happens in the intelligence community. Also not changing, my commitment to these outros. You still have 2 quality books to choose from. Check the video description for more information about them. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.